Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Hi, I'm Karen Falwell, and I'm a grateful member of Alanon. I'm going to try not to be the drama queen that I am. Thank you, Carol, for such an honor. This is a beautiful place, and it's just been so much fun to be here. Thank you to all the committee chairs and your family for supporting recovery. I love coming to weekends like this because there's such enthusiasm and love for the program. And we get to be a service in a way that, you know, we can't always do in regular meetings. So it's just great to be here and be amongst you, and in such a beautiful setting. And I also wondered if you, I'm going to pay for this dearly later, but I wondered if you would all just indulge me for a moment. Today is my sponsor's birthday. And could we sing happy birthday to Benoy? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Benoy. Happy birthday to you. Keep coming back. It'll be worth it. I love you, and it was a very important day for me when you were born, because God knew I would need you all these years later. Thank you for sharing so much of your life with me. And Tracy and Lisa came all the way from Arizona just to come and be a part of this, and that means a lot. So I think the reason I'm a little unnerved up here is because some people that have taught me a lot are sitting in this room. Bob, Corinne and Mike, Marilyn, I mean, just giants in this program to me. And again, just to have a seat in a room is a big deal. But to have people in the room that you really look up to, my heart is very full of gratitude. And a bunch of us in Arizona are planning a big 55th anniversary event for Alanon. In November, it's 55 years that Alanon actually started. And I'm 45 years old, and it, you know, sometimes I get overwhelmed that I live in a time when Alanon exists. I come from generations of alcoholism. My father's 75, and he just found out that on his grandfather's death certificate, he died from an alcoholic fall. And it said on there that that was the reason for death, which is unusual now to have alcoholism listed as a reason for dying, let alone all those years ago. My grandfather was an alcoholic, my father, my husband, my uncles, my cousins. So I am so grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous for saving not only my family's life, but for helping save my life too. I'm an Alanon of the type, I really appreciate the fact that Al-Anon's been able to stand on the shoulders of Alcoholics Anonymous. I belong to a Sunday night meeting that studies Lois Remembers, and in her preface she talks about how for 17 years she sat in AA because there were no groups for families of alcoholics. And AA was her first love. And I can so relate to that. So thank you to Alcoholics Anonymous for giving Alanon an opportunity to recover in a format that shows us exactly how to do it. Recently got an opportunity to go to Stepping Stones, and if you ever get back to New York, it is just a phenomenal place to go and see the history. And you know, there was a time when I first came into Alanon and I read the big book for the first time, I thought to myself, wow, that would have been such a magnificent time to live. You know, everything was unfolding and all these miracles were happening. And then I realized that I'm living in that time now, because people like Wendy are coming to conferences and conventions. And I talked to a newcomer Thursday night after the meeting, and the look in her eyes, you know, just that glimmer of hope that maybe, you know, her life can be different, maybe her family's life can be different. And that doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect, but that we don't have to do it alone, that we have steps that we can follow, that we have literature and experiences of others that have gone before us, and sponsors that are so wise and so generous with their time and their hearts. So I'm excited for you, Wendy, and to know that miracles are coming, and we need you. We need you here. It makes those words in that big book come alive. You know, the age of miracles is not dead. I was born in Chicago, Illinois, and the only way I could describe my childhood is just a chronic case of PMS. I mean, I didn't even have PMS, but I was very moody, irritated, crabby, you know. I have 4 brothers, and literally when I would come in the room, it was, oh, you know, don't make her mad, oh, you know, like the police were there, freeze, you know, just everybody quit having fun, I'm here, what are you doing? Some of that was, I hate to admit that, but the inventories, you know, kind of, you get to look at the truth, and some of that was, you know, the alcoholism, the family disease that was going on in that home. On top of that, my mother suffered from a really severe case of rheumatoid arthritis, and it was just forever a surgery after a surgery. If she wanted to continue to walk or use her hands, you know, she would endure these surgeries, replacements after replacements after replacements. And I realize now, you know, having gone through the steps many times, that those scenarios set up a real big gap between God and me. Because I was raised in a religion, I would go to those, you know, catechism courses and hear about these miracles that happen in the Bible, but it wasn't happening in my home. You know, my mother wasn't waking up without pain. My mother wasn't cured. And that was not what I wanted. You know, I wanted those miracles to happen for my mother. And I didn't realize that at a very young age, I rejected God. I really believed that God existed. And I think it's in the AA 12 and 12, it talks about people that have had faith and lost it. It's even harder to come back to that. And, you know, God didn't answer my prayers the way I wanted him to when I was really young, and I didn't realize that that would be something I would carry throughout my entire life. So, you know, my mother would have a surgery. I have 4 brothers. Daughter's supposed to pick up the pieces, wash the dishes, cook the dinner, that kind of thing. So, you know, I was wearing all these different hats, and as a person that loves chaos and activity too, I really got into it, and, you know, would have the laundry going and the cooking dinner, and, you know, telling my brothers, barking out orders on what to do, and, you know, and I was 13 or 14 years old. So, and then my father would come home, and all that stress of my mother's illness, and, you know, driving across Chicago to go to work, and ice and snow, and he didn't like the lights on. He liked it dark. He liked something to drink. He wanted us to be quiet. Nobody talked about their day. You know, it was just, okay, this is how we're going to get through this night. And so I couldn't wait to get out of that house. I wanted to do my own thing. And by the way, I was going to go to college, and I was going to be smarter, and for some reason, I don't know where I picked up these ideas. I thought if you like competition, it was only with sports. You know, if you were a perfectionist, it's because you wanted to be a clean freak. You know, I started seeing these things in myself, but in other areas. I wasn't competitive in sports, but I was competitive with, you know, my brothers, with my parents. It's just, I could do it better, I can do it different, I'm going to do it first, I'm going to do it my way. And so, you know, I headed off to college. And it's funny, because when you get what you've always wanted and it doesn't fill that hole, that spiritual void, you have a real problem. It's a big problem. So the whole time I was in college, I could really, you know, the arrogance could grow, because that was just another weapon I could use to tell my family how wrong they were and how I knew it all, kind of thing, just the arrogance. But when I graduated, it was another story. I had no clue what I was going to do. I talked a good talk, but I just couldn't back it up. You know, upon graduation, I had no more idea what I was going to do with that education that day than the day I walked into college. And I drug it out 5 years. I mean, I did it as long as I could. Still had no idea, what am I going to do with my life? What am I here for? What is my purpose? So I started filling out papers for the Peace Corps, because I was going to save the world. You know, obviously the people in the United States didn't understand how to do it, and I was going to go help these people that, you know, could really appreciate the wisdom and the energy and the effort that I could bring to helping them. So I started filling out those papers and went and spent 3 months working with handicapped children up in northern Arizona, with a friend of mine who was equally depressed and morbid, and, you know, so we managed to help these kids. It was kind of a weird environment. Anyway, we both probably ended up gaining about 25 pounds that summer. We were both very depressed, and, you know, this is kind of my deal with Fantasyland. The week before we're going to leave, I'm going to start working out. Now, I've gained 25 pounds. We're in a really high altitude, and I'm going to start jogging, which I hate. So, you know, go out and do that a couple days, and then it's like, as usual, well, forget it. You know, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. I just did not have the ability to stick with anything. So, came back from that summer, and, you know, I'm going to go in the Peace Corps. And the problem with me is I make these plans, and I want you to hear every detail of these plans. But something I still have to kind of let go of, you know, top line the story. You don't have to tell every detail. But I would get in people's faces because I wanted that, look what I'm doing. You know, the emptier I'm getting inside, the more I, you know, look what I'm doing. It's so extraordinary. I can't have just the average life, graduate from college, go get a job. No. Look what I'm doing. It's so spectacular. It's going to the Peace Corps. I've got my papers now. I'm going to the Philippines. And my degree was in business, so they wanted to give me a business position. I said, no, I don't want that. I want social work. Put me where the people really are going to need my help. So it was in digging a sewage system is what I was assigned, what I was comfortable with, and I accepted that duty. Up until the day I met my husband. So, you know, I've got these Peace Corps papers, and I am so self-righteous and arrogant. My motives were not good. They weren't really my motives were not really to help the people of that country. They were really to make my life make some kind of sense and have it make some kind of purpose. But in between that time, another friend of mine picked up a second job, and she was working at this restaurant at night, and she said, you've got to meet this friend of mine. You've got to meet this guy I met at work, and I just kept hearing about this guy, Kevin. So when I went to this restaurant where she worked, and he stepped out of the kitchen, and I laughingly say I always love men in uniforms, and he stepped out, and he had his little plaid apron on, and that was the uniform to me, and thought, this is interesting. So shortly after that, if I fast forward, shortly after that, the Peace Corps papers were getting ripped up, and those people didn't need me so much anymore. And maybe, darn it, I was going to use that business degree. Maybe that is what I should be doing. So I started looking for a job in business. And again, this problem that this family disease of alcoholism, the way it's affected me is I don't live in reality, and I don't have to drink to escape it necessarily. I'm the type of kid that I'm watching the Olympics, and I took some gymnastics when I was younger, and I did okay, and I'm thinking I'm going to go to the Olympics. Now I'm fighting with my mother because I won't practice my gymnastics one time during the week. I just show up to the lessons. But in my mind, I'm going to the Olympics. You don't have to practice. Anything that has to do with work or consistency or discipline, I don't want anything to do with it. But I want to go to the Olympics. It was really the same thing with the Peace Corps. I want to say that I went to the Peace Corps, but I don't want to go and actually live there for 2 years and not have electricity and, not have all the conveniences of home. So I have this weird sense of reality, and I don't have to drink. I do not have to drink to escape. I just think it's so. So, and this is on my resume. This is what I bring to my relationship. Doesn't live in reality. Has chronic PMS. High expectations, perfectionist, competitive. Great. Don't you want to date that kind of gal? It sounds like a lot of fun. And my poor husband, he had no clue what he was getting into. Good thing he was drinking. Really, one time somebody asked me, I'm not cured. We were talking about relationships, and, it was this, and then you have to get to know them, and it's this and it's that. And I was just listening to these people in program really trying to do it right. It could be Kelly and Rose. You go on a date, and you take it slow, and you get to know them. And I'm like, thank God I married him when he was drinking, because I don't think I could do all that, Again, the work, effort, unselfishness, not my strong suit. And so Bill Wilson writes about the selfish personality in the chapter to the wives in the big book, and that, the family has, especially the wives he focuses on, have that makeup, and it's just, I want it my way, I want it now, and too bad if you don't want to be this person that I've imagined you to be. So, how can I say we started dating? I mean, we just started hanging out, and I knew from the get-go that alcohol was going to be an issue. I just knew it, but I really didn't care. Just didn't care. What a diversion I needed from my life. I needed a distraction so badly. I was so empty inside. I felt so, because remember, I got that college degree, and that wasn't the answer. So the emptiness inside of me was just this big gaping hole, and I don't know how to do anything different. So I need this distraction, and I have to say, I wimped out in college. I tried alcohol to be my distraction. I did it. I did it for a while. I did pretty good at it, but I wimped out at the end. An alcoholic sober member of AA asked me when I came down, well, why did you quit drinking? And I said, are you kidding? The hangovers were killing me, And he said, well, that never stopped me. And I thought, oh, well, okay, I did wimp out, So here was this distraction. Here was my entertainment. Here was this person that, would do anything at the drop of a hat, who could make me laugh, just like that. And that's all I needed. So whatever price I would have to pay to be relieved of the bondage of myself and my intensity, my intense nature and perfectionism, whatever price I would pay to get relief from that, which I've heard alcoholics say came for them in a bottle, I would pay that price. And so, my behavior was not the way my parents raised me. I was doing all kind of things and not going through a relationship the way we're taught in this program. Everything, the cart was always before the horse. It was just. And once we had been together for 2 years, because my parents dated for 2 years, they got married. I don't know. Again, these ideas, these old ideas that got stuck in my brain. Once you date for 2 years, you get married. So we did that, and I was so proud of myself at that wedding reception. He did not drink. Now, I found out later that he had smoked many joints on the golf course while the bridesmaids' pictures were being taken, but he didn't drink. And again, my arrogance was, I was very proud of that accomplishment. Thank you very much. And we went down to Mexico for our honeymoon. And of course, I was a little melancholy because I wasn't getting all the attention I wanted. I put myself in that position. I was competing with alcoholism, and I had no idea what I was competing with. I had no idea what I was up against. And my strong suits, my manipulation, my martyrdom, my self-centeredness, my arrogance, my I'll show you, my vindictiveness, all that stuff, I'm thrusting against the disease of alcoholism, and it's just not working. I'm not getting the attention that I need. And so I'll just, it was not the honeymoon of my dreams. We were down in Mexico, and everywhere we went, somebody would say, oh my gosh, where are you from? Because here we were, this newly married couple. And before I could say Arizona, my husband would say Aristona. And I'm like, why do you keep saying that? He was obsessed with trying the Mexican weed, and I'm like, it just seemed like everywhere we went, people were asking, where are you from? Where are you from? He's Arizona, Arizona, Arizona. So we took a little, we were in La Paz, Mexico, and we took a little jaunt down to Cabo San Lucas, and it was just this other couple who didn't speak English, us, and the little van driver, So we get down there, and we're having lunch, and it's a beautiful day, and the ocean, and it was just wonderful. When we got back to the van, there were only 4 of us on the van. Now it's the other couple, the bus driver, and myself. Because my husband stopped to get something along the way, and we're waiting, and we're waiting, and we're waiting, and we're waiting, and nobody else on the bus speaks English but me, and they're looking at me, and they're looking at me, and I'm like, what? So finally, I swear, we're just about ready to take off, and my husband comes running up, and he's all winded, and I'm looking at him like only an Alanon can look when you don't diss me, it's our honeymoon, and I have all these expectations, and this is not the way you should be treating me. And he gets on that bus, and I'm looking at him, and he said, well, the bus driver takes off, and he says, well, I have to fess up. I gave a guy $20, and he left me on a corner because he was going to try that Mexican weed. He didn't get it, but 4 of us were sitting on that van waiting, and I'm thinking, this is my honeymoon? This is my honeymoon. It's only going to go downhill from here. This is the way we're starting our marriage and our life together. So. But again, I put myself in that position because I don't know that alcoholism is a disease. I don't know that he doesn't have a choice. I don't know that alcohol is doing for him what he's doing for me. And there's a story that Bob details that it helped me so much when I heard him talk about this. And I hope you tell it later because I'll butcher it here. But, you know, describing how an alcoholic feels with the alcohol. And this little study was done with like a rat. And the rat can go over and press a lever and get some of this juice. And eventually what happens is the rat gets so addicted it's just laying on that pedal where the juice comes out. And if it can't have that juice, it doesn't want to live. And I got that. Thank you for sharing that story because I got it. Because you know what? Not long into our marriage, my husband was getting arrested. He used to jokingly say, yeah, when I drink, I break out in handcuffs. Well, he did. And he was, this little scenario kept playing itself over and over and over again. Drinking, driving, drinking, jail, drinking this. And the day came that we were standing in court, and the game was over. You know, I had tried to get a new attorney. I tried to get the court dates postponed. All this, again, this is my fantasy that I have to live in. But the day came that I couldn't stop that anymore, and he was being sentenced, and I was like that rat. And I did not want to live anymore. So I understand how an alcoholic feels when that alcohol is taken away. And I understand what it says why in the big book it says, you know, that fear of that alcohol being gone. You know, it's overwhelming, it's overpowering. And because I've been taught by sponsors to go to open AA meetings and read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was privileged to hear a sober member of AA share that story, and I got it. It really went from my head to my heart because I was so empty inside. And you have taken the thing away from me that I am doing all of this for. I am going to this business job that I hate because, you know, we need a roof over our head. And I'm doing all these things and running after him in the middle of the night and, you know, going, searching cars and cleaning him up and lying and doing all this stuff. And now you're taking that away from me. And the problem is when that's gone, whatever that, whether it's alcohol or for me, somebody like me, the alcoholic, that hole is so big and the despair is so at a depth that I never want to forget that bottom. I never want to forget the day I was at a red light and my foot was on that brake, and I wanted to take my foot off that brake so bad. Life just wasn't worth living. And besides that, if this is the way it's going to be, you know, okay, God, you know, I have this resentment against God anyway. Take it. If this is what it's going to be, you know, I just don't want to do it anymore. And so, you know, I don't want to forget the bottom that I had, because my husband was not happy about the fact that he was in court and he was getting sentenced. But he knew the drill, and he knew he would be locked up for 12 or 14 months, and he was accepting it. And I wanted to kill myself. And with that thought, I got one more self-help book, because this was the late 80s. And I had a stack like this. Again, I'm not going to read them, because that would be work. But I've got this stack like this, and when I do read a couple pages, I read this much just to be able to say that, you know, I read this, blah, 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 and this means this, and this means this, and just crazy, crazy, crazy. But there's something different about this book, and I know it was God working in my life, because all I read through those pages was go to Alanon, go to Alanon, go to Alanon, go to Alanon. And it's funny, because other people have read that book and they didn't have the same impression. But for me it was go to Alanon, go to Alanon, go to Alanon. And so I opened the phone book and I called and I went to a meeting. And I'm so grateful that that meeting was really practicing the fifth tradition, that they really believed that they had one purpose, and that was to help the families and friends of alcoholics. They would do that by giving understanding and encouragement to an alcoholic. They would do that by working the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous themselves, and giving comfort to those family members. And I got comfort that night. And I was blown away. I could not talk. I could not say a word. I just looked in their eyes, and they were so kind to me. And I knew that somehow I knew that they understood. Now, I'm a person that would not tell anybody what was going on in my life. My parents didn't know. My brothers didn't know. My friends didn't know. Nobody knew. Nobody was with me that day, because I chose to do it this way. But nobody was with me that day when I saw my husband walk in front of me in shackles. I was going to do it on my own if it killed me, if you know what I mean. One of those Alanons. And it almost did kill me. So I don't play around with my program today, because I know where this disease will take me, and I know that I can't compete against alcohol. And somebody like me, if I'm out there on my own, I'm going to do it. And by the time I realize I'm doing it, it's too far gone. So I got so much comfort and so much understanding that night. And they warmly welcomed me, and they asked me to keep coming back. And that next Tuesday night I came back, and I got a one day at a time. And they pointed out the page July 1st to me and said, I read those pages. The husband that, the man that I married is not the source of my happiness or sorrow. We each have our own lives, and it blew me away. It was life-changing to read that literature, and to go back and read that every day and realize that, I had to be responsible for my own happiness. That I had to be responsible for my own actions and attitudes, and so it just gave me hope. It just gave me this much hope. So if you're new to Alanon, or if you're going through a particularly challenging time, as life goes on and different things happen, I still go back to that page. And my sponsor has pointed out many times that you could put in there, she put in there her husband, her daughter, her son, her grandchild is not the source of her happiness or sorrow. That page is so powerful. So I'm also really grateful that in that meeting they talked about sponsorship. Get a sponsor, get a sponsor. They were in my face. Get a sponsor, get a sponsor. So I finally got a sponsor. And then I kept hearing about the steps. And I was going to step meetings, and it really bugged me that I couldn't say, oh, I did that step. So I just started really getting serious and pressing on with my steps. And I'm just so grateful for the directions, the design for living that's laid out in that big book. Because I just haven't had a problem that I couldn't find the answers in that book with my sponsor, in those steps, in these rooms, reasoning things out with each other, sharing our experience, strength, and hope. We share our lives here, and my life gets better. I didn't particularly like the idea of making amends, since that was something I had no experience with at all. And if you're an Alanon type and you're a perfectionist, you want to do it perfect, and you don't want to ask questions, and you don't want to feel uncomfortable, so your life gets really small because you don't try anything. And thank God for the people in the rooms that shared their experience about making amends and how their life had changed. And I'm so grateful for that, because I had to go to my family that I had so negatively impacted and take responsibility for how my disease and my attitudes had affected their lives. I made amends to my mother, I made amends to my brothers, I made amends to my husband, I made amends to coworkers. It just seemed like I was forever making these amends. And finally got to the point where the last person, because I had to start with the easy ones. If your ego's this big, and the easy ones, I had to start and gradually work up to the family and the ones closer. The last one on my list was my father. And the timing never just seemed right. And finally, my sponsor said to me, if you don't make amends to him by next week, just don't even call me. And she had never said that before. And I thought, so I would call her on Tuesday, so Monday night, I drop in on my parents' house, and I started making amends to my father. And I'm so grateful for the directions in that big book, and I'm so grateful that I got on my knees and prayed before I made those amends to him, because I would have had some expectations. And he doesn't handle emotions very well, So he kind of rushed me out the door. And we didn't sit down and have this big, father and daughter talk and da-da-da-da. He kind of rushed me out the door and he said, I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, I do. I said, I wasn't the best daughter to you. And I was very disrespectful. And there was a time when I was 17 years old that I pushed him about a car to the point where, just to get me to shut up, he just slapped me across my face. And then, then I had the excuse to blame and blame and blame him over and over and over again. And really, he just couldn't take my nagging one more minute. And what started happening with my relationship with my father was, I don't know, he was more approachable to me. And it kind of started changing the way I was with my husband, too. And what I realized, God just really gave me this insight, that I had been so judgmental and so harsh on my father that I always thought he was intimidating me, and I was intimidating him. How could he come and approach me when in my eyes, he never did anything right. When my parents would argue and the alcohol would come out, I would always pick my mother's side, always. He didn't go to college. He didn't do this. He didn't do that. I was intimidating him. And I realized that, the big book describes an alcoholic as a tornado. I was a tornado. I ripped through the lives of my parents. My brothers barely existed to me. They were just in my way, interference, get away from me. Never did I see how their day was. Never did I just, talk to them and want to hear about them. It was just, move out of my way. I'm on a mission. I've got this to do. So when I hear in the big book it talks about the success of AA, the reason the message spread so quickly was because, number one, the recovery of the alcoholics, and number two, the repaired families. As an Alanon, I was the only one in recovery, and my family was getting repaired. And I became very, very involved. I became a GR of a group, and remember, my husband was about 14 months locked up. And during that time, an alcoholic, a sober member of AA, went in to pay a visit on him and 12-stepped him. And he started attending AA meetings, and he became a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And when he was released, he had this cute little ankle bracelet that he would wear, and we'd have to be at home at certain times, but that's okay, I'm flexible. I can do that. But that wasn't for long, and we were really just so excited about recovery and going to Mountain High and conventions and girl talk and as much recovery as possible. And my husband fell in love with a man named Jim Shaw. And the first time we came and spent a weekend with Jim and Vinoy, Jim just grabbed Kevin and they went golfing. And I couldn't get over one alcoholic talking to another, because he wasn't treated like a second-class citizen, like you ex-con, you know. We were trusted in their home. They went out and golfed like good friends for a long time, and they just met, and it really changed my husband's life. And just around 5 years in the program, my mother's illness got worse, and you know, I thank God again for recovery, because she had 4 years in Alanon the month that she died. She started coming because she wanted to support her daughter, who had a husband in prison. She would say, "My daughter's got a problem, her husband's in prison, and I am here to help her." And then the second, you know, after a few months, then it was, "And my husband is doing this." I would hear all this about my father. And I remember saying to my sponsor, "Oh, I can't stand it. I can't hear her talking about my father one more minute." She said, "Well, if you have to, when you split in groups, make sure you're not in the same group." And literally right after that, she got a sponsor. And she was taking direction from a sponsor. And she was working steps. And she made amends. And her entire life changed. And she always had a faith in God. And was very devout to her religion. But the neat thing about it was, you know, those wounds from alcoholism, because she grew up in the disease, those steps gave her a way to heal. And the open AA meetings gave her a way to understand what was going on with her alcoholic relatives. And she had so much peace when she died. And it was because of the members of Alanon and Alcoholics Anonymous. And just to think that, you know, I was in Alanon at that time. I could be of service to my mother. My husband was sober. He was able to help my father with the funeral arrangements. It was just incredible. And everybody in the fellowship showed up to that funeral. And my father was blown away. And the day before the funeral, actually, I went over, you know, we had been up, she spent 6 weeks in intensive care, and it was just very hard. But I'd gone home to get some sleep and come back to do some final arrangements for the funeral. And all over my father's kitchen was food, flowers, cookies. He looked at me and he said, "Your friends were here. You know, they couldn't stay, but they just wanted to drop this off." So here was, you know, the fellowship taking care of my father. It was just amazing. And when you're going through a time of such grief, the kindness of others makes everything possible. You know, makes it possible for you to get up the next day and believe that things are going to be okay. It's just those quiet, you know, little actions. You know, we just kind of continued on, and a couple of my brothers ended up coming to the program. I really didn't know which room they were going to end up in, because we partied together in college, and I thought, well, we'll just see how this story goes. And it ends up that I have two brothers in Alanon. One about 13 years, and one is going to celebrate 10 years next month. And his wife had left him because of he was so critical. He was so judgmental. Nothing was ever good enough. It's the family disease of alcoholism, that restless, irritable, and discontented. And the neat thing about it is, because he's coming and he's got a sponsor and he's working in an Alanon program, he and his wife are back together. They have 3 children, and she really supports his program, although she's not in one, because she knows that if he's not working his program, that's not the kind of marriage that she wants to be in. So it's been amazing to see how this program has saved my family. Around 10 years into the program, you know, again, active and going through job situations and buying a house and doing this and doing that, you know, just being very, very busy. Just some changes started going on with my husband. And I really attributed it to work. He's just working a lot of hours, and I mean, my gosh, his work life had improved so much, because when we first got married, he was a bouncer at a strip joint, and now he actually had a legitimate job. He was working in like the photography industry, but working a lot of hours, and he seemed really tired, and he seemed a little agitated, and one day I said to him, if you're not really liking your job, why don't you try something different? And no, it wasn't the job, blah, 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 blah. And so 6 months after I had, my 10 years in the program, we threw a little 10-year party for him. And 2 months later, he was drunk. I think the 10-year party set him off over the edge. It was the guilt of the fact that he'd actually started smoking a little bit of marijuana here and there. And he was drunk. And there's a line in the big book that says, burn the idea in the consciousness of every man that he can recover no matter what his present circumstances, job or no job, wife or no wife. As long as you trust God and clean house, you can recover no matter what your circumstances. And I watched my husband get 3 months of sobriety, go back out. Come into AA, go back out. And the day that I just really the reality really set into me is, here was a guy who loved AA. Here was a guy that liked to go to Vegas and see Bob, and go to California and see Jim, and go to Oklahoma and see friends, and nowhere was too far to go for AA. And I heard him say one day, I know I'm an alcoholic, and I can't stand to be in an AA meeting. And I knew it was bad. I knew that was bad. And I just had this naive belief that, well, you know how to get sober now. It's different than before. Because now you've been in AA, you understand, you just show up, you start going to meetings again. So what? That's okay. I didn't know how hard it was for somebody who lost their time and their sponsorees and, the respect of other alcoholics. And he would come into a room and people would stop talking. And, people were just worried for their own sobriety. How could this happen? What happened? It wasn't personal. It was just all, I really believe that we all really want the best for each other here. But we also have this fear of this disease. And how did this happen? And how could this happen? And he just couldn't get it out of his mind. So it took about 2 years for another bottom to hit, and I had the police at my door in the middle of the night one more time. 12 years in the program, and I just knew I was powerless. I knew I had that path, going down that path of trying to control another person, nearly took my life physically. It took my life spiritually. It took every emotion and feeling out of me. And I could not go down that path again. And I could pray for him, and I could keep going to my meetings, and I could just trust that God had a plan. And he was pulled over for drinking and driving, and he was going to court again. And I remember hearing a speaker once say, I don't get to tell God that I already went through that. I don't want to walk down that path. I don't have that luxury. I have tools that help me live one day at a time. Keep in close contact with my sponsor, and a sponsor that would tell me, this is alcoholism and there is no blame. And you just do each day. And right before he had a court date, this was one time where I was just really, it was okay. I mean, it was not the way I wanted things, but I was able to go to work. It was nothing like when I first came into the program, because again, now I have choices. I have a God. I have a higher power. I have a fellowship. I have a sponsor. And I was kind of toying with the idea, maybe I should leave for a while. Maybe I should just leave for a week and kind of figure things out. And my sponsor said to me, if you think he's going to come running after you, you're sadly mistaken. And I thought, how does she know what I'm thinking when I don't know what I'm thinking? And then she said, are you ready to see him with someone else? Well, maybe I could do another day. Because I wasn't. I love my husband dearly. And that line in the welcome, Kelly had read it in the preamble or in the welcome earlier in the workshop, you know, we can find contentment and even happiness, whether the alcoholic is drinking or not. And I just had to let it go. I had to be honest, and my sponsor kept me in check on what my motives were. Because deep, deep down, I have a disease that tells me I know best. And that's not the case. So I just kept doing a day at a time, and he had his court stuff to go to, and I enrolled in a master's program. And I started taking my classes and just letting him deal with his thing. And unbeknownst to him, the laws had changed since he had been sober a period of time, and what would have been a 4-month sentence for him ended up being a 4-year sentence for him. And but God knows the perfect timing. You know, I was so busy with school. I was so busy with commitments in this program. You know, I had a lot of really good things going on in my life. And I also have found that there were a lot of lessons for me to learn during this time. It wasn't easy watching him getting locked up again. It wasn't easy watching alcoholism take over. But it didn't take over both of our lives. And I just continued on with school, and I started noticing different things around the house, you know, like the grass was growing this high and the light bulbs were burning out in every room, and I kind of just got it about how much he had been doing around the house. You know, again, this wonderful resume I want to say about the kind of wife I am. I didn't cook. I mean, there was like no food in. There was mustard, ketchup, a bottle of Worcestershire sauce in the refrigerator, you know, a couple of ice cubes in the freezer, a box of cereal in the cabinet, and people were just shocked. And it's like, oh, Kevin did the cooking. Wow. You know, oh, Kevin was changing the light bulbs. Oh, Kevin was cutting the grass. Oh, Kevin was taking care of the dog. Kevin was taking care of the pool. Karen, what did you do? I had to swallow, you know, the kind of wife I was being in the program for 12 years. And it was not what I thought. One more time, not living in reality. And it kind of dawned on me, oh yeah, he asked me for help once in a while. I didn't get it. I did not get it. And until I was literally on my knees praying for God's help to start the lawnmower. Please, God, I'm 45. I can do this. Did I really get the amount that he was doing? So, I mean, just it was very humbling. It was very humbling because, again, one more time, I'm shown I'm not the person I thought I was. And God had certain lessons for me to learn, and God had certain lessons for my husband to learn. And for a hard-headed person like me, this is what it took. And I had to go into where he was in prison and make amends to him again for not respecting him, not appreciating him, not cooperating with him on the things that he wanted. He wanted a little more organization. I was thriving on the chaos, you know. And I didn't get it. It takes what it takes. The other thing I got was another chance to look at my relationship with God. You know, a lot had transpired from that time when I had all those resentments. You know, that grade school God that I had clung on to. And when my mom passed away, I really realized that God could be a comforting God. And when my husband started drinking again, I realized that God was a loving God. And I just started seeing that, God really has a phenomenal plan. And my job is to get out of the way and be patient and let it unfold. And in 2004, I completed my master's degree. And now the great thing that has come of this experience is my husband in August was released. He's home, he's sober, he's doing very well. Can't leave the state yet. I'll keep you posted. But he's doing very well, and the life is back in his eyes, and he's happy what Alanon has done with his wife. Because I respect my husband today. And I can tell him that, I don't have to compete with him for the attention and the accolades and that kind of thing. But what happened was, while I would go visit him, is that I noticed these families in these visitation areas, and I couldn't stand that there was a chance that they didn't know Alanon existed. And so I started getting on my high horse about prison work, and people would I'd walk in a meeting and they would say, "It's not an H&I meeting, Karen. It's not H&I today." Obsession. And I said to this gentleman who was taking meetings into where my husband was, I said, "How do I find out how to get some literature into that facility?" And he said, "Why don't you come to an AA H&I meeting Tuesday night?" And I said, "But I'm an Alanon." He said, "So?" One more time, the generosity of Alcoholics Anonymous. The humility of Alcoholics Anonymous. If it's going to help, come. We'll share it openly. You can have everything. I went to that meeting. I was blown away. I was sitting in a room with 50 or 60 alcoholics that were so enthusiastic about carrying the message into confined, prisons, hospitals, lockdown units. And my mind was just blown away, and I couldn't write fast enough. And they said, "Well, we're going to start emailing the notes to you from every meeting, too." I started showing up. They think it's an appointed position now, because I've been going for over a year every Tuesday. I'm more regular than some of the coordinators. But I just think about how God works, because if he would answer that question differently, if he would have just said, "Oh, talk to officer so-and-so," I would have found out how to get the literature in that one facility. But what I found out was that there's all these facilities, that there's all these families that need help. And Lisa actually just got badged. We started the first Alanon meetings in the county jail in Maricopa County. It's one of the biggest counties in the country. And there's been no Alanon in those rooms. And because of that, the officer has allowed us to put the Alanon literature in every county jail, the visitation areas. If one family or friend can be helped, just to know that there is a program and there is a solution for them. And the trickle effect has been exponential. We found out about all these women's shelters. There's a lockdown facility for juveniles. I've been an Alanon sponsor for many years, and there's just so much to be done, because alcoholism is ripping and roaring through people's lives. We get to sit in a beautiful place like this and enjoy our recovery. And I guarantee you, somewhere in Santa Clarita, somebody's getting arrested. And somebody's wondering how they can do the next day. How can they get up in the morning? I'm so grateful that I got this commitment before my husband was released, because I sit in a state prison meeting once a month, and I sit in a county prison meeting once a month. And it helps me to have continued compassion for what he's going through, this transition period of coming home and not having somebody tell him what to eat, where, when, what, wear stripes, not to wear stripes. The questions are hard. So, there's just so much to be done. And I'll tell you, I sat in a meeting the other week, and a gal because we have a little overcrowding problem in Arizona, and they house 240 women in tents, 115 in the summer, and they're living in tents, and we're sitting around this circle, and it came to this gal's turn to share, and she said, you know, all I know is I was having a fight with my boyfriend, and I'm sitting in here, and my daughter's turning 7 on Monday, and I can't be there, and I'm going to spend the next 6 months sitting in here, and I wasn't drinking. What's wrong? He said, I know that anger. I know what that's like. But here's the solution. Here's a pamphlet, and we'll be back. Because you know what? I could honestly say to her, you're worth us coming in here for. You know, she said, you could be doing anything else. It's Saturday afternoon. I said, there's nowhere else I'd rather be. So thank God for Alcoholics Anonymous for paving the way, because they just opened their arms to us. They gave us so much help, coordinators, telephone numbers, and like I said, they think I have a commitment. It's just, I love being there. There's not been 1 month that I go there that I don't leave with tears of gratitude, and they're such an example for me. Part of the anniversary that we're having in November is to AA. Our theme is we declare our debt of gratitude to God, to AA, and to our Alanon founders. I've been blessed to learn so much from the old-timers in this program. And H&I has got a special place in my heart. And we're going to have some of the members that have so generously shared with us at that event and show some gratitude to them. For 55 years of Alanon recovery, you know, how do you say thank you to Alcoholics Anonymous? The only thing I know what to do is to show up, to talk to the newcomers, you know, take those commitments in those prisons, whether it's convenient or not, and honor the program that has saved our lives. Thank you for listening, and thank you for helping me, you know, again, have hope and have just a phenomenal, incredible life and heart full of gratitude. I feel like what Alanon did for me is, I don't know if you guys have seen The Grinch, you know, the Dr. Seuss, how the Grinch, you know, the Grinch has the little heart in the beginning, and at the end it's busting out, and that's how I feel. You know, my heart and my life is so full, and thank you for allowing me to be here and participate.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.